Well, opening practice for the 2024 Azerbaijan Grand Prix is completed. Charles Leclerc, quickest for Ferrari. Not quite the story of his day though, is that, JBL?
No, I think that's probably the highlight of his day. Of course, FP1, 3 times red flagged, a little bit of debris at the start, and then the second one.
There's a tiny bit of debris from what I could see.
My excuse was I was trackside, but the second one, a big bit of debris in that Leclerc put it in the wall. It turned 15, which is the end of those sweepers as you're coming downhill. So caused a little bit of damage to his Ferrari, prompted a rebuild between the sessions. When he came out during FP2, really unhappy with the handling balance as well. So that was something that he was quite adamant on the radio that needed to be fixed. They said there was nothing wrong in the data, so that left him a little bit bemused that they couldn't see it. He decided to box eventually of his own volition, came out, and it seemed that everything was a little bit better, and built back up into a medium tyre run, slowly getting back onto form, and then soft tyres, put in the lap, and 6 thousandths quicker than Sergio Perez, who's looked very, very good this weekend so far. But yeah, good lap from Charles Leclerc. Managed to dispel, his usual crash at Baku. It seems to happen every year, doesn't it?
Get it out of the way early.
Yeah, get it out of the way in FP1 and have a full focus on the rest of the weekend. But yeah, a really, really good lap. Interesting to see his kind of traces over the lap as well. Really, really good in the first half of the lap as well. It did tail off a little bit in the Old Town section through the sweepers, comparing his lap with Perez's. Perez was just a little bit better by turn 16, which is the final proper corner. The two were pretty much neck and neck, and it was just Ferrari's top end speed that carried him to the end. So if he can just dial it in there, then he's looking very, very good.
One thing I would say with Leclerc's lap is it came much later in the session, and there's like a massive, as ever in Baku, massive track evolution factor. So I'm told it was worth something like half a tenth every minute. The track was simply getting quicker. So as you'll be able to see over our shoulder, Oscar Piastri going home for the night, because that's the big hotel where basically all the drivers stay. Anyway, getting massively sidetracked. Effectively, I think Leclerc's, by doing that lap later, I think he ends up about 3 tenths up on where he otherwise might have been. And actually, speaking of McLaren, I think Lando Norris saying very downbeat things, but let's not forget his best lap in FP2 totally blocked accidentally by Pierre Gasly struggling with a battery deployment issue. If you look at the data traces, Norris is absolutely there is 0.000 in it with Leclerc up to that point, and Norris was running much earlier in the session, so maybe not all as bad as it seems for McLaren.
No, I don't think so. And if you look at Oscar's long runs as well, they're in the mix for sure. And that's what we usually do with the Friday feature. Go into those long runs. Obviously, we don't have all of the engine modes and fuel running data and that kind of thing, so it's kind of best guess at this moment in time. But yeah, McLaren looking good, and I think there's things they need to work on. They know that, but I don't think they're in a bad spot. But I think Red Bull and Mercedes are in there, and I'm sure you can tell us a little bit more about those as well.
Absolutely. I think just on Red Bull, we're going to start with a bit of a off-track news analysis, and just getting a little bit into what Christian Horner was saying in the press conference. And I put it to him that the news this week has been pretty much all about a soon-to-be former Red Bull employee in Adrian Newey. And I said, Horner saying, it's no great surprise that he was going to go there. Obviously the team were pretty clear he wasn't going to be retiring. It became obvious he wasn't going to go to Ferrari. I said to him, was it not a little bit surprising to see Newey announced with such fanfare at the Aston factory, given he's still a Red Bull employee, still on their payroll? Lewis Hamilton, the Mercedes driver, announced as going to Ferrari. He didn't go to Maranello for a big unveiling. So Horner didn't miss the opportunity to run with that. He said that Aston Martin, he feels, celebrated prematurely on announcing Adrian Newey, which is quite interesting, because I thought actually Horner spoke quite glowingly of Newey earlier in his comments previously, and I think obviously that just reflects their working relationship and their achievements across their shared history together. I do think it was a little bit rich from Horner. This is the Piranha Club, right? It's just the way it goes. But things like Red Bull effectively announced Jonathan Wheatley as Audi team principal before Audi announced it. So there's it's like, hang on a minute, you can't sort of have it both ways when it comes to questioning announcements. But anyway, we understand actually via our colleague Ben Hunt that as a result of all this, Red Bull pretty unhappy, even away from the media, and Newey taken off the travel rota for Red Bull from now on. So we won't be seeing him apparently at any races towards the end of the year. But let's stick with Red Bull, JBL. Sergio Perez, second place. very, very close to Leclerc. As I said, that Leclerc lap looking probably better than it was in reality. So a good day for Perez, but why was Max Verstappen also not in the picture?
Well, so comparing his lap to Perez's, they're pretty much similar in the first two sectors. And looking at that Red Bull GPS trace as well, they know they've got a lot of work to do with regards to understeer, particularly these 90-degree corners here. It does kind of exacerbate the problems with the Red Bull. It understeers into the corners, and so where they have a little bit of an issue is getting that traction out of it. And so relative to, and again, going back to Leclerc's lap versus Perez, you kind of see that sort of little creep up and up. But comparing Perez to Verstappen this time, again, pretty much neck and neck until going to that final corner, and then Verstappen just loses pretty much half a second on that final straight along Nefçalar Avenue. So I believe the engine was probably turned down on Verstappen's car. Maybe Perez's was turned up.
Makes sense,
certainly. I think they wanted to get more of a read with Perez's car. And Perez is, is a Baku specialist. He's very, very good here. In the 9 races he's done, 8 or 9 races he's done here, he's only failed to finish on the podium twice, I believe. So yeah, it's very good. We give Sergio a hard time, but he's very, very good around here. And again, he's a really good reference point for where the Red Bull is. So I think Verstappen keeping his powder dry at the moment, but both drivers seem pretty happy. I think in the post-session comments rather, quite upbeat, which given the last few rounds, they haven't been, certainly.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll be very intrigued to see where Red Bull end up for the rest of the weekend. But slightly more tricky story at Mercedes. That's the other topic we're going to touch on in this video. Actually, pretty positive in terms of the overall times. Lewis Hamilton third, just 0.066. I say that very carefully from my notes off Leclerc, again with that caveat that Leclerc's run coming much later in the session. So good for Mercedes, yes, in terms of one car, but George Russell sort of in the headlines or a bit of the story of the day simply because he had quite a few reliability issues on his car. Now that started in FP1, the team looking at the typical analysis of oil samples that they will do after and even sometimes throughout every session, basically spotted an anomaly, a problem in data, and saying that something potentially was happening. So quite rightly, very cautiously, they took the engine out and replaced it for a different one from his pool. But what that meant basically was that he was delayed getting into FP2, finally got in it, had to run offset, doing various points. I think his first laps were his long run rather than the normal way we'd see it in FP2 by going from a harder tyre to a soft tyre and then to whatever tyre you want to test for the race. But then right at the very end of the session for Russell, ordered to pit early, saying there looks like another issue with the engine. In fact, what that actually was a sensor failure, or a sensor fault, saying that we think there's going to be a water leak on the car. In actuality, or in reality, I should say, not the case. But that's good for Russell that he doesn't have to have another tricky engine change or anything like that. And from what I understand, the engine that was used in FP1, they don't think it's badly damaged. Obviously going to do a full assessment back at Brixworth, but Mercedes fairly confident that will stay in the pool for Russell for the rest of the season.
But we teased this yesterday, but Alex, you spent FP1 with Haas, listening into Ollie Bearman's radio. Ollie Bearman's first FP1 as a race driver for the team. So tell us a little bit about that. How was it? Had the cans on? Were you calling the shots on the pit wall?
Absolutely not. And thankfully for Haas in that case. My main takeaway, just from the sensation of being in the garage, was how unbelievably hot it was. So I've been working on a piece there that we're going to be running ahead of the Singapore Grand Prix about the famous challenges of that race and the heat there. But the point had been made to me, just the people working in F1 garages, they can't escape from the heat. And even here in Baku, it's pretty hot, but it's not as hot as it can be, and it's definitely not as humid as it will be in Singapore. So yeah, that really struck me. It's like, wow, after like 5, 10, 15 minutes, I was really sort of getting warm, especially those big cans over the years, as you say, JPL. But basically, my other takeaway was just the pages and pages and pages of notes that I took, because I thought, try and note down literally everything I'm seeing and hearing. And actually, what struck me really about Bearman was just how silent he was on the radio. There was no flapping. He didn't seem any nerves. He didn't seem any particular problems. And it was interesting chatting to Nico Hülkenberg after the session, and then again with Ollie Bearman. Hülkenberg making the point that the track was incredibly dusty. He said he could see it on his track run, like just bits on the floor, road cars going by kicking up plumes of dust. They're not even obviously F1 levels of downforce. So really tricky challenge. Ollie Bearman not phased, encountered quite a bit of graining, which will be something to watch, I think, in the race for all cars. But yeah, just seemed to, what cliche can I call it? I don't know, he took to it like a duck to water, that sort of thing. Obviously he's quite familiar with the team, but yeah, just struck me as just didn't have anything that he particularly needed to register as out of the ordinary. Spoke to one of the engineers afterwards, and they said actually that's quite typical of rookie drivers. What they're doing is they're just trying to soak in as much information as possible, and really that's the most sensible way to go about doing your learning. So, well, there we are. That's Friday in Baku. See you back here tomorrow where we'll be going over the results of qualifying.